Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 12 of WVD Monthly, or should I call it AVD Monthly? I got to figure out how I'm going to change that name, but we'll get that done. I've got Jon Spallone from XenTegra on. Jon, how's it going?
It's going good, thanks.
Jon, this is your second one of these, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, we ran without Rob last time, and Jon did a good job. He comes over from the Citrix Azure team, so he knows a lot about AVD. I got to train myself. We got to have it like a tip jar every time you say WVD. You got to throw $1 in. We also have Rob Shaw. Rob has been our normal guest on the show the last, 4 or 5 months. And Rob, Rob did work for Microsoft on the AVD sound side, but now he's got a new job. So we'll keep talking to him as long as he keeps talking to us. But Rob, what's your new role?
So still kind of GBB now on the AVS team, which stands for Azure VMware Solutions. So basically, if you want to run your ESX hypervisor on Azure, we're the team that can help you kind of understand that further.
Yeah, that's great. Hey, and sorry if you hear background noise. The cleaning crew just showed up and they're trying to break into my office to vacuum, and they think I'm gone. So if it looks like a robbery is getting ready to happen, that's what it is. So let's talk a little about your new job, Rob. So that's VMware ESX, basically vSphere. Can I call it vSphere? Is that okay?
Sure. Yep, it supports vSphere. A lot of the general tools that you would normally use for VMware.
So that's vSphere running bare metal hardware in Azure data centers.
Yep.
So if I'm a VMware customer, does that mean I set up a cluster that's on-prem and a cluster in Azure, and it's all one big data? Is that 2 data centers? What does that look like inside a VMware environment?
Yeah, so it would kind of appear as a second data center for AVS. It's a 3-node minimum, right, to kind of create an array in Azure.
Yep.
And you can scale up from there or scale down as demand draws down, which is nice. You don't have to build out on-prem hardware for peaks that you otherwise might hit at, say, seasonal workload increases.
What about something as crazy as like a live migration from one side to the other?
Yeah. So using a lot of the tools you might use normally, like HCX, still functions. You can use, obviously vMotion up to Azure as well. Just about, I don't know any exceptions, but just about every workload, would work that you could run on your on-prem ESX environment.
So my mind goes crazy thinking about that from a VDI use case, as well as from other use cases, like literally live migrating by the hour, depending on where the cost is more affordable. You think it'll be that crazy?
So, we say, to be safe, we say it's about an hour, to see, say, I want to add a new node, to my pod.
Yep.
And that's just depending on, kind of workload availability, that kind of thing. It is dedicated hardware. So we're assuming that there are, spare nodes ready to go, that can join your environment.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to learn more and talk to you more about that. I think I've already got a customer I'm texting right now that I want to just get on a call and have them talk to you, and I can learn from that call.
Yeah, I think the way I look at it is it's kind of the easy button, right? Hey, I don't have time to rehost and refactor and test everything. I got to get out of a data center, or I got to move somehow, some way. It's kind of that easy button for that.
Yeah. Well, our topic for today is Azure Virtual Desktops in the August updates. I know Jon's been prepping a little bit on this, and hopefully as well. Let's talk through what it is you guys released for updates for August of 2021. First thing I'm seeing here is something I find very interesting, which is a Windows 11 preview. This thing's coming, right?
Correct. So, as an operating system, it's now fully supported in Azure Virtual Desktop. Even multi-user capabilities, are also included.
So as a tech guy, answer this question for me. 5 years ago-ish, we were talking about Windows 10 being the last operating system with different versions, of course, as they came out. That was, what we saw happening. Why is there a Windows 11? What changed to make the marketing side of Microsoft say, oh, no, there's going to be another one. Here it comes, Windows 11. What drove that, you think?
Yeah, I think what's been communicated to us is just a further exploration and doubling down on security, being able to bring things like the trusted execution capabilities, and from a usability perspective, really making it I'd say even more, say, tablet and touch aware, that it can really give the user the ability to kind of customize the desktop to a way that really works for them, instead of having to kind of stay within a certain, configuration GUI that doesn't necessarily provide the customization they want.
Right. From a VDI perspective, what does that mean for us?
So I think, continuing on the AVD path of having an operating system that's pre-configured for VDI, right? So it's got VDI, baked into it at its core, as we use, for example, the multi-user operating system to be able to leverage that virtual environment.
John, you probably have some background and thoughts and comments on Windows 11 and the business and marketing side of that, as well as the technology side from a VDI and cloud perspective. Anything you'd want to bring up?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, I know what you were saying, Andy, about going away from, the version releases and where we were going with it. I just think it's more consumable this way. It's more easier to grasp, because you're not having to balance a conversation about cloud and the features and functionalities of cloud, and then how this OS works out. What I did find interesting, though, is that, it looks like there's more support for the high-end graphics with 11 coming in the AVD side.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing I did note, too, that was pointed out, that this is preview. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Rob, it looks like it's for enterprise and education only at this time.
I believe that is correct. Yeah. It does. It's interesting. It still shows up as Windows 10 when I create a host pool. But I think I had a first release of that, and I think that's been resolved. Yeah, I'm not sure, what that path looks like today on how soon that'll move out of preview. Generally that's about a 1 month time frame when we go from public preview to GA. This being a new OS, there may be a longer cycle.
Yeah, it looks like initially we have 3 flavors: the enterprise multi-session, and then multi-session with M365.
Well, and that makes sense, right? I mean, Windows AVD is really for enterprise, and by enterprise, I don't mean you have to be a 10,000 user company. It's just companies that have enterprise use cases.
Yeah.
And that's us, right? I mean, we're 55 employees now, but we have some of the same needs as, I'm sure some of the big, value added resellers and LARs out there. So next topic in the updates here is multimedia redirection. Looks like this is focused on Chrome and Chrome derivatives of browsers. Rob, thoughts on this one?
Yeah, so this is one that I've been really looking forward to. It's something that when WVD came out, it was based on the kind of an RDP protocol, but back to, say, version 7, right? So at version 7, we didn't have multimedia redirection. We didn't have a lot of specific capabilities around some of those items that had been baked into the traditional remote desktop protocol, including multimedia redirection being one of the key ones. And a real big factor in that was to be able to bring about that reverse connect capability to really make that VM runs in Azure, but really you're just getting proxied access to it. So to provide, kind of a high security environment. but once multimedia capability has come out, we kind of first kind of snuck it in Teams redirection if you had the right version of Teams. And that was really kind of built kind of as a widget to where that could be used by other vendors. And as they've now shown is to be able to port that over to things for traditional multimedia. So I think this is a big thing where, you know, folks who are looking to have good graphic, good video capability to be able to redirect to an endpoint that's capable, right? So it will have to follow that Edge and Google Chrome capability to be able to redirect those capabilities.
Yeah. So John, you're an old school virtual app, virtual desktop guy. Multimedia redirection is the ability to offload that and provide the user a good experience and save on resources back on the back end. It's a must-have, right?
Oh, definitely huge. And again, just like our last discussion, you can see the handshake with what we're talking about as we step along, you know, with the Windows 11 preview, giving us more GPU capabilities, now giving us the redirection. It's really a great tie-in.
Hey guys, do you think so? Rob mentioned something just now about modularizing some of these things, so it makes it easier for Microsoft to reuse and maybe some of the other vendors. Is there anything in the Azure Virtual Desktop today that only Microsoft can take advantage of? I guess one thing is the multi-session piece where, you know, using a true client OS, they're the only ones you can do it with. Others can do on top of that, but you can't take that and do that in your own private data center, I don't think. Rob, you may know more about where that stands and where that's going, but are there any other secret things, or maybe not secret, but things that Microsoft can do in Azure Virtual Desktop that you can't use in other remoting solutions?
Well, you know, just one thing to mention is that, you know, our partners like Citrix and VMware, they continue to be able to leverage those, you know, those multi-session while in Azure. And that's a key distinction, that multi-user Windows 10, now Windows 11 operating system, it is only capable in Azure today. You know, there are certainly some redirection capabilities that we've seen where, you know, some of the first pieces that have come available, like Teams, you know, they had to be on Win 10 correctly patched and the right version of Teams in order to offload that. And you know, now we're seeing that with the multimedia redirection. We've seen some vendors kind of step into that as well. Like Agile was one of the first ones to take that and be able to port that over to Teams. Citrix and VMware kind of already done it, you know, in their own protocol.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But that is the hope, though. There are some other collaboration type companies that have taken that kind of that SDK, if you will, for redirection to be able to port it over to their own. Some, I'm not sure how many have gone GA and have been formally announced, so I won't put my foot in my mouth and say any.
Well, just the fact that you know, Azure, Microsoft is allowing the other hypervisors to do bare metal installs in their data centers because, you know, it's the right thing to do. Plus also it creates revenue streams for Microsoft that where they can be part of everybody else's story as well. I mean, that kind of shows that this is no longer a my way or the highway kind of thing. It's Microsoft supporting the other players in the space and providing that that foundation that can be built upon. Yeah.
And we've kind of seen that from customers that have started the adoption there. It's, hey, I've moved some things like to Kubernetes or to other container technologies or native Azure based, but you know, maybe some of maybe their VDI workloads, maybe there's others that it was just easier to port over as an ESX VMDK file. Same for some of the VDI workloads we've seen. You know, first Horizon exclusively, and now Citrix has certified that, from what I understand as well.
Right. So next one talks about Windows Defender application control and Azure disk encryption. As you guys pointed out early on in this podcast, Windows 11 some element of that is to show that things are changing and the name's different. And part of that is even a more serious take on security. Does that tie into what we're talking about here?
Yeah, I think so. One of the things that we saw early on was that for Defender, Win10 multi-user wasn't initially supported, and took some time during COVID to get that out the door. It was some parts of Defender saw it as a server OS, and some saw it as a desktop OS. So it took a little time to get that through the process to get it, to get that full support, for Defender. And
help me understand why that matters, at least maybe the Azure disk encryption support piece. And this stuff's back in the data center. I guess in theory it's roped off from everybody else, but this is just in case it's not.
Yeah, there are those folks that have requirements that force them to run on a fully encrypted disk. Even though at rest we are encrypted, and the communication is encrypted, we wanted to be able to meet the expectations we see in say Fed, we see in financial sector, where that has to be on an encrypted disk.
Yeah, requirements needs to be there. Yep, absolutely. John, any thoughts on this, or the encryption, or the Defender application control piece?
No, I think it's just another show of the value add of how Microsoft is taking their own functionality and giving it over to the cloud, and that whole virtual experience for the users. So I do think this is a great security step moving forward, and I look forward to some more things coming in the near future.
All right, next one on the list is smart card support. Is that as simple as what it sounds like?
Not exactly. The interesting thing is some things like ADFS were initially supported in the initial release of AVD, or which was WVD at the time. That later, when we went to the more GUI based environment, broke some of that capability with ADFS, for example. So what we ran into is, especially again, federal space probably pushes this more than anything. Being able to support those CAT cards at authentication, and that's handled via a KDC proxy that handles that token on behalf and presents it. That initially was that we saw as a workaround. Now the AVD product team has fully vetted and documented that process.
Okay.
We also see it as kind of a sidestep too, right? Hey, I'm not a customer that's fully using Azure Active Directory. I still use my traditional AD environment, but I want to be able to leverage that capability. Long term, we see where some of that capability becomes easier as we have those Azure Active Directory domain join VMs, and even FS Logics being able to support that capability as well.
So it makes it smart cards in Azure Virtual Desktop. First class citizen gets all the features everybody else gets.
Yeah,
at some point.
Now, with that, Rob, is this just on the commercial side of Azure, or I know you did bring up the Fed. I've worked with the Fed a lot in the past. Is this something that we're seeing already in the .gov side?
Yeah, it is. And in fact, it was the .gov side that started this process that later the product group kind of followed that to make that, to solidify that, if you will. The thing that initially I do a good bit of work on the HLS side, on the healthcare life science side, doesn't get us the capability for things like Imprivata support, that a lot of people are really hungry for. Just left a call earlier today, capability is something that those conversations have begun to try and make that capability, but doesn't mean that it's broad support for all vendor smart cards.
And this is also just supported within the AD join, the Azure AD join
Right.
devices, correct?
Yeah.
So guys, the next and last topic here is screen capture protection. I ran into that the hard way with Citrix, where I enabled that, and then I went to do a demo via Teams and nobody could see my screen. And to be honest, I spent literally a minute or so trying to figure out what's broken. It's like, oh, wait a minute, this is how it's supposed to work. Rob, I guess this was something that was being asked for by your customers and made it to this point in the delivery that you guys put it in here.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been, I want to say in preview, what seems like since the beginning of the year, but I know it hasn't been that long. I know maybe that's more like private preview. But yeah, it's good to see it come out of public preview and into, general release.
And Rob, how does that work? In other words, is it part of the client that's turned on by policy somewhere in the spectrum of things?
Yeah, you have to have line of sight to your domain controller, and you leverage the KDC proxy as part of that capability. And initially, the documentation was just really what a couple of the cloud solution architects had kind of put together that are focused on the Fed side that got blessed and turned into fully documented.
As we're talking through all this, KDC's come up multiple times. I had to go look it up. I guess that one's kind of new to me. John, thoughts on this, as well as the concept of the KDC and where that plays roles today and into the future when we have these remote data centers that, thanks to remoting protocols, don't feel remote.
Yeah, I think this is another good enhancement, especially, with that disabling the print screen on the device side for that connection. Now, you said, Rob, it's a line of sight that needs to be there from that device.
Yeah, and I kind of crossed that back over to the smart card capabilities, but yeah, for the for turning off screen capture, it's just a setting, much like we would see on our normal RDP settings in the policies for the host pool. Sorry about crossing the streams on that and confusing you guys.
Don't cross the streams.
Yeah, so it's never good.
He said it's not good. Yeah.
Until the end of the movie. And the end of the movie, it's okay.
It's always foreboding. Rob, is there any limitations that are known on this right now, as far as getting this enabled?
Not that I've seen, right? I didn't have a lot of customers really requesting this, so I wouldn't say it's something that I've seen, fully implemented out there.
Yeah, I think it's more that it's not as much as the user doing the screenshot as more like the keyloggers or the ransomwares that are doing it.
Yeah.
For that security side of the house, correct?
Yeah,
it's more of that external threat versus the internal threat.
Yeah, and it was a feature that I believe I know Citrix has had for some time. VMware, I'm not sure, but probably also. But as a result, we had customers ask for it. Not my customers, but probably more again in that high security type environments.
Well, keyloggers and screen captures have always been that one element of security that we chased in the remote computing world, and those are being solved.
Yeah, especially chasing recently with all the events, so it's become more prominent.
Yeah, good point.
So guys, we've covered the meaty part of this, and I'm going to just try to summarize this part. I skipped in the very beginning all the agent side, the virtual desktop agent updates, and there looks like there's about 25 or so bullets here. Is there anything that's happened on the agent side that's this sexy part at the beginning of the blog that either one of you would call out as, must see TV pieces?
No, it's always been the principal objective to make the platform more stable, right? So these many times, unless you've run into them, they happen and get fixed before you realize many times.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing to highlight here that I probably brought up in this podcast and others before is this is an asynchronous solution. Yes, most of the hard work's done on the back end, but without that endpoint intelligence and connectivity, and in this case, the agent, you can't take advantage of what's on the back end. A lot of people don't seem to understand how that works in this remoting EUC world, but it's certainly asynchronous, right? There's a ton of stuff that has to happen on the agent for whatever operating system it is that it's on. And wait a minute, virtual desktop. Am I saying that right? Is this the agent that runs in the VDI, or is this the client that runs on the endpoint?
Yeah,
I may have
correct.
totally screwed this up. This is the VDI.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, just pretend I didn't say any of that.
Yeah, it looks like it's more for just beyond the general bug fixes and the add-ins that we have. We're getting a lot more actual health check diagnosis coming in from the agent to the backend infrastructure for the admins to be able to get more info and more detail on what's really happening out there from that virtual device.
Yeah. Yeah, no, good.
And I think to your point, Andy, if you scroll up, I believe you'll see the updates to the actual clients.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah, and those are done and broken out by different operating systems. So you can see, hey, what changes have happened in Windows and Mac and whatever.
Let's click on one and see what yeah, we're gonna skip that. But anybody can go click on those and read them if they want.
Yeah, it's really becomes useful when it's, hey, I need this XYZ widget that's in Windows. Can I do it in Mac, for example? And you can kind of track that down.
Well, when you're cross-pollinating between different endpoints, it's really important. Or when you have something that's broken, you go find that it was fixed in the next release, which 9 times out of 10, that's the right answer. Occasionally you upgrade the client and find that you created new issues. But for the most part, with regression testing and things these days, those are like old school problems when we were kids.
Yeah, and I know you jumped off that page real quick, Andy, but I actually dug down a little bit deeper, at least on the Windows side. It looks like it's going into some more detail on the multimedia redirection and also some bug fixes and the DirectX turn black for Teams on the AVD client to Windows. So yeah, there's definitely some more details for the geekier people that want to dig into it.
Yeah, and interesting. You mentioned in mentioning Teams, it's always been that what we've gotten from the teams is that Teams is kind of an amalgamation of a lot of different capabilities, and as different particular aspects get fixed, that gets fixed, and we see it in AVD. But like one of the laggers has been session sharing, for example, or we had some pieces where CPU was spiked in certain OS types. So you got to see those kind of minute pieces, broken out by OS update.
Takes 2 to tango, and that client's really important. And let's do this real quick. I just want to test this theory real quick. The client that most people don't think about at all is the web client. Let's see if we look at that, what we got for updates. Really nothing maybe since July, but that's the interesting one. I've never even had a chance to play with that in the world of WVD, AVD. How good is the web only client, Rob? Do you see people adopting that? Is it making progress?
I do see it a good bit, right? I would say it's probably the number 2 client.
Wow.
Generally it's Windows first, and then it's the web client next. Surprisingly, because it's also probably one of the least feature rich capabilities, but it covers everything. If I'm on a Chromebook, it'll work. If I'm on a toaster, it'll work. If you have a toaster like I do, anyway. But I think one of the big announcements for web was a drop of support for IE fairly recently. IE is, kind of a lot of hooks and capabilities. And so I think that was a couple revisions ago, but that was a key one, right?
Yeah.
Really, so we really lean on the HTML5 based browsers that are Chromium based in most cases.
Yeah, and it's funny, Andy. Great minds think alike. I guess I went to the web client as well, and looking through here, what was it in July? File transfer support for the web client, which I think that's pretty big, especially from a web client access to my VDI. And then the one previous to that, again, goes to this theme of the user experience, redirection of the microphone to the remote session. So it's just amazing when you think about where we've come from FAT clients to now everything is so streamlined. It's amazing how fast we get there.
Yeah, microphone of the web clients was the feature that, it was one of the key things that came out. I think that folks were requesting that. So
Yeah. Well, it shows that all the players in this space, but Microsoft in this case is taking the space serious, and got to get those features in there if you want enterprise adoption, even for customers of all sizes. Well, gentlemen, I appreciate it. It's 6 o'clock on the East Coast almost, and it's time to go home. But I really appreciate you jumping on once a month and doing this with us, Rob. If there's someone else we need to be working with, let us know. But we'll keep bugging you until you tell us we got to stop.
always good to talk to you guys.
All right, sir. Have a good one.
Y'all take care.
Bye, guys.